I sat alone in my studio apartment on my 28th birthday, phone in hand, waiting for a call that never came. No texts, no voicemails, nothing from my family. I opened Instagram mindlessly, and my heart stopped. There they were at the airport, balloons everywhere, champagne glasses raised. My parents had surprised my younger sister Caroline with a trip to Italy. My mother's comment glowed beneath the photo. "She's the only one who makes us proud." I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I opened my banking app, found the family trust account I'd been managing for 5 years, and clicked transfer all funds. $173,000 moved into my personal account. I whispered to my empty apartment, "Happy birthday to me." I set my phone down on the cheap coffee table I'd bought secondhand 3 years ago. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Something inside me had finally broken free, like a bone that had been set wrong for years, suddenly snapping back into place. It hurt, but it also felt right. The studio apartment around me was small, maybe 400 square feet total, with a kitchen that was really just a hot plate and a mini fridge tucked into one corner. The bathroom was so tiny I could touch both walls while sitting on the toilet. But every single item in this space, I had paid for myself. The bed, the table, the single chair, the lamp that flickered sometimes because I'd bought it from a discount store. Nobody had given me anything. Nobody had helped. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. It was getting dark, and I could see families walking together, couples holding hands, groups of friends laughing on their way to birthday dinners. I was 28 years old, and I was completely alone on my birthday because I had spent the last 6 years sacrificing everything for people who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with legs. Let me tell you how I got here. 6 years ago, when I was 22 and finishing my senior year of college, my parents' business collapsed. My father owned a small consulting firm, and my mother helped him run it. They'd built it over 20 years, and it was our family's entire livelihood. Then the economy shifted, clients disappeared, and within 6 months, they lost everything. The business closed. They drained their savings, trying to keep it alive. The house went into foreclosure, and then my father had a heart attack from the stress. I'll never forget getting that phone call. I was in the library studying for finals, and my mother's voice on the other end was broken, desperate. "Your father's in the hospital. We have nothing left, Annabelle. We're going to lose everything." I was 22 years old. I had just been accepted into a graduate program with a full scholarship to study data science. It was my dream. I'd worked so hard for it. But when I visited my father in that hospital bed, saw the medical bills piling up, saw my mother's face age 10 years in a matter of weeks, I knew what I had to do. I turned down the graduate school. I got a job at an accounting firm instead. It wasn't what I wanted, but it paid decent money right away. Then I got a second job on weekends doing bookkeeping for small businesses. I moved out of the dorm and into the cheapest apartment I could find. And every single month for 6 years, I sent money home. $300 at first, then $500, then sometimes $1,000, depending on how many hours I could work. I paid for my father's medication. I paid part of their rent when they downsized to a small apartment. I paid for groceries when things got really tight. I did this quietly, without complaint, because that's what family does, right? Meanwhile, my younger sister Caroline got to pursue her dreams. She was 19 when everything fell apart, just starting college. But instead of Caroline having to sacrifice like I did, our parents made sure she could keep going to school. Art school, no less. Expensive, private art school where she studied painting and sculpture. When I asked how they could afford it, my mother said they'd found a way, that Caroline was too talented to waste her gift. Later, I found out the way they'd found was me. Half of Caroline's tuition was coming from the money I sent home every month. They just never told me. Caroline graduated and spent a summer traveling through Europe, posting beautiful photos from Paris and Barcelona and Amsterdam. When I asked her how she afforded it, She said it was a graduation gift from our parents. I found out later I'd paid for that too. They'd asked me to send extra money for a few months for a family emergency that didn't exist. It went straight to Caroline's travel fund. Through all of this, Caroline lived at home rent-free. She got a job at an art gallery that paid maybe $25,000 a year, barely enough to cover her own expenses, let alone contribute to the household. But that was fine. Caroline was the creative one. Caroline was special. Caroline needed support to flourish. And me? I was the stable one, the responsible one, the one who could handle things. So I handled everything, while living in a 400-square-foot box, eating ramen most nights, never taking vacations, never buying anything nice for myself. For 6 years. 2 years ago, things finally started to improve for my parents. My father recovered fully and found a new job. They moved into a better apartment. Their finances stabilized. And that's when they came to me with a proposition. "Annabelle, sweetheart," my father had said over dinner at their place. Caroline was there too, half listening while scrolling through her phone. "Your mother and I have been thinking. You're so good with money. You've helped us so much these past few years. We want you to manage a family trust account," my mother added. "We've managed to save some money, and we want to invest it for emergencies, for the family's future. Would you handle it for us? We trust you completely." I felt proud. Finally, they were acknowledging my skills, my help. They were asking me to be part of building the family's financial security. Of course I said yes. They transferred $100,000 into an account and made me the manager. I had full access to invest it, move it between accounts, whatever I needed to do to make it grow. And I did my job well. I researched investments carefully. I balanced risk and reward. Over 2 years, I turned that $100,000 into $173,000, a 73% return. I was proud of that. In all that time, I never took a single dollar for myself. Not one. Even when my car broke down and I had to borrow money from a coworker to fix it. Even when I got sick and had to choose between paying for a doctor visit or paying rent, the family money was sacred. It was for emergencies, for all of us, for the future. Except it wasn't. As I stood in my apartment on my 28th birthday, phone in hand, my mother's best friend Patricia called. I almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant spam, but something made me pick up. "Annabelle." "Honey." Patricia's voice was cautious, almost guilty. "I don't know if you knew this, but I think you should. That money your parents had you managing, they were planning to give it all to Caroline. For her wedding." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "Her wedding?" I repeated. "Next month, honey. They were going to announce it as a surprise at her engagement party this weekend. I thought you knew. Your parents kept saying Caroline deserves it because she's making something beautiful of her life, and you're already so stable and successful." There was a long pause. Patricia's voice got quieter. "I just thought someone should tell you. It didn't seem right." The call ended. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear even though the line was dead, trying to process what I'd just heard. Caroline was getting married. Nobody had told me. And my parents were planning to give her $173,000 of what I'd been told was family emergency money. Money I'd grown through careful investing. Money I'd never touched, even when I was desperate. They were giving it all to Caroline. For a wedding. To my sister who'd never sacrificed anything. Who'd been supported and coddled and praised while I worked 2 jobs and lived in poverty. The guilt I'd felt when I transferred that money evaporated like steam. This wasn't theft. This was 6 years of back pay for a job I'd never been properly compensated for. This was my inheritance for a life I'd given up. This was justice. But then reality crashed back in. Caroline's wedding. They'd been planning to give her my entire trust fund for her wedding, and now she wouldn't have it. The mental image of my sister in a wedding dress, crying, while my parents explained that the money was gone because of me, it should have made me feel guilty. Instead, I felt rage. Pure, clean rage. Because nobody had even told me she was engaged. 24 hours passed. I didn't sleep. The money sat in my personal account, and I sat on my bed staring at my phone, waiting for the explosion I knew was coming. I kept drafting text messages to my parents. Let me explain. Delete. You don't understand what you did to me. Delete. I deserved this. Delete. Nothing I wrote seemed adequate. The explosion came at 10 in the morning. My phone rang. Caroline. I stared at her name on the screen for 3 rings before I answered. How could you? Her voice was already sobbing, hysterical. How could you steal my wedding money? You've always been jealous of me, but this? This is evil, Annabelle. This is unforgivable. Caroline, I didn't know it was for your wedding. Nobody told me you were even engaged. Everything is always about you, she screamed. This is my special time, my moment. And you had to ruin it because you can't stand seeing me happy. You've never been happy for me. Not once in your entire life. That's not true. I've supported you. Supported me? You resent me. Everyone knows it. Mom and Dad know it. All you do is act like you're better than me because you have some boring job and I'm an artist. Well, guess what? I'm getting married to an amazing man, and I was supposed to have a beautiful wedding, but now you've destroyed everything. I gave up graduate school for this family, I said, my voice shaking. I worked 2 jobs. I sent money home for 6 years while you went to Europe and art school. Nobody told me that money was yours. Nobody told me you were engaged. Nobody even called me on my birthday. Oh my God, this is about your birthday? Grow up, Annabelle. Not everything is about you. She hung up. I sat there, phone in my hand, shaking. Less than 5 minutes later, my mother called. Return the money immediately. No hello. No acknowledgement of the birthday they'd forgotten. Her voice was ice. Mom, can we talk about this? There's nothing to talk about. You stole from your sister. You need to return every penny right now. It's not stealing. That money, don't you dare. My mother's voice went sharp enough to cut. You were supposed to help this family, Annabelle. That's what we needed from you. Someone stable. Someone responsible. Not someone who punishes us for having the audacity to celebrate your sister's achievements. You called her the only one who makes you proud, I said quietly. There was a pause on the other end. Then my mother said, well, she is. Caroline creates beauty. She brings joy to people. What do? Count other people's money? Manage spreadsheets? Caroline has a gift, and we're proud to support that gift. You've always been practical, and that's fine. But don't expect the same celebration for doing what you're supposed to do anyway. Each word landed like a physical blow. I'd heard versions of this my whole life, but never stated so plainly. Never with such cold clarity. I'm giving you 48 hours, my mother continued. Return the money, or your father is taking legal action. She hung up before I could respond. An hour later, my father called. When his name appeared on my screen, some small, pathetic part of me hoped he'd be different. Maybe he'd understand. Maybe he'd at least acknowledge that they'd hurt me. I've spoken with our lawyer, he said. His voice was cold, businesslike. The voice he used to use with difficult clients. You're in serious legal trouble, Annabelle. Dad, that money? Let me finish. I've reviewed the account documents. You were listed as account manager, not co-owner. You had authorization to manage, invest, and pay bills from the account, but not to withdraw funds for personal use. What you did meets the legal definition of theft. Embezzlement, actually. The room started to spin. Dad, I'm your daughter. And you stole from your sister's future. Yes, you're my daughter, but that doesn't give you the right to take what doesn't belong to you. He paused. I have 2 daughters, Annabelle, but only one of them thinks about anyone besides herself. I've spent 6 years thinking about everyone but myself, I said, and hated how my voice broke. You spent 6 years doing what family members do. That doesn't entitle you to steal. You have 48 hours to return every penny. If you don't, I'm filing a police report. And Annabelle? With the documentation I have, you will be charged. You could go to jail. Your accounting career will be over. Is that really what you want? He didn't wait for an answer. The line went dead. I spent the next 2 hours frantically reviewing every document I had related to the account. He was right. My name was listed as authorized account manager, not as co-owner. I had permissions to access and manage the money, but legally, I didn't own any of it. What I'd done could absolutely be prosecuted as theft. My career would be destroyed. I might actually go to jail. Everything I'd worked for, completely ruined. I was crying now, angry tears that I couldn't stop. This wasn't fair. This wasn't justice. They'd used me, manipulated me, taken years of my life and my money and my dreams. And now they were going to destroy what little I had left because I'd finally pushed back. I was about to spiral completely when something caught my eye in the account transaction history. I'd pulled up all the statements trying to understand the legal situation, and I was scrolling through years of deposits and withdrawals, and there it was, 3 years ago. Large withdrawals I didn't recognize. $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, then another $10,000, $40,000 total over the course of 6 months. I hadn't made those withdrawals. I checked the dates against my calendar, my email history. This was during the time Caroline was traveling through Europe. The timeline matched perfectly. My parents had been taking money out of the trust account without telling me. They'd been funding Caroline's lifestyle while telling me the account was untouchable, sacred, only for emergencies. They'd given me access to manage and grow the money, but they'd been secretly withdrawing it for Caroline all along. I had leverage. Maybe not enough to win, but enough to fight back. For the next 48 hours, I barely functioned. I took screenshots of every transaction. I printed bank statements. I organized evidence of every unauthorized withdrawal my parents had made. I built a timeline showing exactly when the money disappeared and cross-referenced it with Caroline's social media posts from her European vacation. My phone kept ringing. My mother called 6 more times. I didn't answer. Caroline sent me a stream of text messages calling me every name she could think of. Family members I hadn't heard from in years suddenly crawled out of the woodwork to tell me how disappointed they were in me. But I didn't return the money. Instead, I decided to do something that felt insane, but also necessary. I decided to go to Caroline's engagement party. It was happening on Saturday evening at my parents' house, the house where I grew up but hadn't been invited to in months. I hadn't received an invitation to the party, obviously, but it was my family home. I had every right to be there. I needed to confront them face to face with the evidence of their withdrawals. I needed them to see me, to acknowledge what they'd done. And part of me, some desperate, pathetic part, still hoped we could work this out. That maybe if they understood how much they'd hurt me, something could change. I put on the nicest dress I owned, a simple blue one I'd bought for job interviews 3 years ago. I drove to the house as the sun was setting. The street was lined with cars. They'd invited so many people. When I walked up to the front door, I could hear music and laughter inside. The moment I opened the door and stepped into the house, the laughter stopped. 50 people stood in the living room and dining room, holding champagne glasses and small plates of catered food. They all turned to stare at me. The silence was crushing. My mother was near the kitchen. Her face went pale, then red. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you and Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's important." "You're not welcome here," my mother said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You know what you did." Caroline appeared from the hallway. She was wearing a gorgeous cream-colored dress, her hair professionally styled, makeup perfect. Next to her was a man I'd never met, tall and handsome in an expensive suit. This must be Brandon, her fiancé. "Get out," Caroline said. Her voice shook with anger or tears. I couldn't tell which. "How dare you show your face here?" I saw my father across the room. "Dad, please. Just 5 minutes. I have something to show you." He walked over, his face set in hard lines. "There's nothing to discuss. Return the money or face the consequences. Those are your only options. I pulled out my phone, opened my photos where I'd saved the evidence. You made unauthorized withdrawals. $40,000 over 6 months, 3 years ago. You were taking money from the trust while telling me it was untouchable. My mother's face went pale, but my father didn't even flinch. We're the account owners, Annabelle. We can do whatever we want with our money. You're just the manager. You're staff. And staff doesn't steal from their employers. The word staff hit me like a slap. That's all I'd ever been to them. An employee. A tool. Come on, Caroline said, pulling Brandon forward. I want you to meet my sister before she leaves. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. Everyone, this is Annabelle, the one I told you about, the one who's trying to ruin my wedding. People stared at me with undisguised hostility. I heard whispers. That's her? I can't believe she'd do that to her own sister. What kind of person? I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run. But I forced myself to stay standing there, phone in my hand, evidence that no one cared about displayed on the screen. Brandon stepped forward. He was polite but distant, his handshake brief and cold. Nice to meet you, he said in a tone that meant the opposite. Caroline wrapped her arm around his. Isn't he wonderful? He's a financial analyst. Makes more in a year than you probably do in 5. We're going to have the most beautiful wedding. Well, we were. She glared at me. Before someone decided to be selfish. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. 25 years old, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly rent, standing in our parents' house that I'd helped pay for, announcing her engagement to a man I'd never even heard of, planning a wedding funded by money I'd carefully invested and grown. I worked 2 jobs for 6 years, I said quietly. I gave up graduate school. I sent money home every month. I lived in a studio apartment eating ramen so you could go to art school and travel through Europe. And not once did anyone say thank you. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay or if I needed help or if I had dreams too. Oh, here we go. Caroline rolled her eyes. The martyr routine. You chose to help Annabelle. Nobody forced you. You were 19, I said. The business failed. Dad had a heart attack. What was I supposed to do? Let the family fall apart? You were supposed to do it without expecting a parade, my mother snapped. That's what family does. They help each other. But you keep score. You keep track of every little thing you've done and throw it in our faces. The party had become completely silent. Everyone was watching this family drama unfold, like it was reality television. My father raised his hand. Enough. Annabelle, you need to leave. Now. You've disrupted your sister's special day enough. I looked around the room one more time. At the decorations, the food, the champagne. All the people celebrating Caroline's happiness. Nobody was celebrating mine. Nobody ever had. I turned to leave. Then Caroline called after me. I hope you're happy now. You've ruined everything with your jealousy. I stopped at the door, turned back. I'm not jealous of you, Caroline. I pity you, because you're 25 years old, and you've never had to fight for anything in your life. Mom and Dad gave you everything, and you think you earned it. I walked out before anyone could respond. I got halfway to my car when I heard shouting from inside the house. Loud, explosive shouting. I paused, one hand on my car door. Then Brandon's voice, loud enough to carry through the walls. I can't do this. I can't marry you. The party erupted into chaos. I stood frozen, listening to the muffled sounds of crying, yelling, things breaking. What was happening? The front door burst open. People started streaming out, looking shocked and uncomfortable. A woman I recognized as my mother's sister Helen rushed past me toward her car, tears streaming down her face. Then Brandon emerged, his face red, his tie loosened. He saw me standing by my car and actually made eye contact for the first time. There was something in his expression. Guilt? Relief? I couldn't read it. Caroline appeared in the doorway behind him, sobbing. How could you? How could you do this to me? I'm sorry, Brandon called back. But I can't start a marriage based on a lie. My mother pushed past Caroline, her face twisted with rage. She was looking at Helen's retreating car. "How long?" she screamed. "How long have you been sleeping with my sister?" The remaining guests hurried to their cars. Nobody wanted to witness this. My father emerged, trying to calm my mother down. Caroline collapsed on the front steps, wailing. And somehow, in the midst of all this chaos, my mother's eyes found mine across the lawn. "This is your fault," she said, her voice shaking. "You brought this negative energy into our home. You cursed this day with your selfishness." I stood there, speechless. Brandon had been having an affair with my aunt, and somehow that was my fault? "If you hadn't stolen the money," my mother continued, advancing toward me, "none of this would have happened. You poisoned this day. You destroyed your sister's happiness out of spite, and the universe is punishing all of us for your evil." "That makes no sense," I said. "Get away from my family," my mother hissed. "You're not welcome here. You've never been welcome. You were always the difficult one, the one who couldn't just be happy for others. Now look what you've done." Caroline's sobs grew louder. "I hate you," she screamed at me. "I hope you're happy now. You destroyed everything." My father pulled my mother back toward the house. The last of the guests scattered. I got in my car and drove away, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. Brandon's affair with my Aunt Helen had nothing to do with me. The engagement falling apart had nothing to do with me. But I'd still been blamed, because that's what I was to this family. A scapegoat. Someone to carry the weight of everyone else's problems. I drove back to my apartment, went inside, and finally let myself break down completely. Monday morning came too soon. I hadn't slept more than a few hours since the disaster at the engagement party. My phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from extended family members, all of them telling me what a terrible person I was. I'd turned it off eventually, but the silence was almost worse than the accusations. I got up, showered, put on my work clothes, and drove to the accounting firm where I'd worked for the past 4 years. I needed normalcy. I needed to focus on something other than the nightmare my life had become. I made it exactly 15 minutes into my shift before my manager called me into her office. Susan was usually kind, professional. We'd always had a good working relationship. But when I walked into her office that morning, her expression was cold and uncomfortable. "Sit down, Annabelle," she said. Saturday. "We received a concerning phone call about you on Friday afternoon," Susan began. "From your father." My stomach dropped. "He informed us that you're currently under investigation for embezzlement and theft. He said you stole a significant amount of money from a family trust account and that he's filing charges against you." "That's not what happened," I said. "He's angry because—" Susan held up her hand. "I don't need to know the details. What I need to know is whether there's an active investigation. He threatened to file a police report, but I don't think he actually—" "So there might be charges filed?" I hesitated. "Maybe. I don't know." Susan sighed. She actually looked sad. "Annabelle, you're a good employee. You've been reliable and skilled. But we can't risk having someone on staff who's under investigation for financial crimes. It's a liability issue. I'm sure you understand. You're firing me? We're letting you go. Effective immediately. I'm sorry. If the charges are dropped and you're cleared, you're welcome to reapply for a position. But until then," she trailed off. I walked out of that office in a daze. 4 years of work, gone. My career in accounting, possibly destroyed. My father had called my employer and sabotaged my job. My own father. I drove home, packed up my desk items that they'd boxed for me, and carried them to my car. The whole drive back to my apartment, I felt numb. When I got home, there was a notice taped to my door. 30-day eviction notice. I ripped it off the door and read it 3 times before the words made sense. My landlord was evicting me for being a criminal risk to other tenants and property. I called the landlord immediately. Gerald answered on the 3rd ring. "Gerald, what is this? I've never been late on rent. I've been a perfect tenant for 3 years. I got a call from your mother," Gerald said. His voice was apologetic but firm. "She told me you're under investigation for theft. She said you might not be able to pay rent soon, and that you could be dangerous. Look, Annabelle, I can't have that kind of risk in my building. I've got families here." "My mother lied to you," I said. "I'm not dangerous. I'm not under investigation. This is a family dispute." She sounded pretty convincing. "And she's your mother. Why would she lie about her own daughter?" I wanted to laugh or scream. "Please, Gerald, I need this apartment. I just lost my job. I have nowhere else to go. The notice gives you 30 days. That's more than fair. I'm sorry, Annabelle, but my decision is final." He hung up. I stood in my apartment, eviction notice in one hand, phone in the other, and felt the walls closing in. No job, no home, a potential criminal charge hanging over my head, and $173,000 in my bank account that I was terrified to touch because using it might be considered spending stolen money. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Annabelle Price?" A man's voice, official sounding. "Yes? This is Officer Martinez with the local police department. I need you to come to the station tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Your father has filed a formal complaint against you for theft of $173,000. We need to take your statement." My knees gave out. I sat down hard on my bed. "I need a lawyer." "That's your right. I'd recommend you bring one tomorrow." "I don't have a lawyer. I can't afford one." There was a pause. "Then I'd suggest you find one quickly. This is a serious charge, ma'am." The call ended. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. In and out. In and out. Trying not to completely fall apart. They'd actually done it. My parents had filed a police report against their own daughter. I was going to be charged with theft. I'd lose everything. Go to jail, maybe. My entire life destroyed. And for what? For finally standing up for myself? For taking back money that was partially mine in the first place? I spent the rest of the day going through every document I could find. Old emails, bank statements, transaction records. I was looking for anything that could help me defend myself. Anything that proved this money wasn't just theirs. And then I found it. Buried in my email from 8 years ago, when I was still in college. A message from my grandmother's estate lawyer. My grandmother had passed away my junior year and left me a small inheritance. $25,000. It wasn't a fortune, but to a college student, it was everything. I remembered what I'd done with it. My parents were in crisis. Their business was failing. Dad was sick. I'd given them the entire inheritance to help them stay afloat. They'd promised to keep it safe for me, said they'd invest it for my future. I kept digging. Found more emails from myself to my parents over the years. Here's $500 for this month. Here's $1,000. I picked up extra shifts. Here's $300. Sorry, it's less than usual. Years and years of messages documenting every payment I'd sent home. I added it all up. My grandmother's $25,000 plus 6 years of contributions. The total came to $92,000. $92,000 of my own money that I'd given them, that they'd supposedly been keeping safe for me. Then I found an email from my father from 2 years ago, right when they'd asked me to manage the trust account. "We're putting your contributions into a trust account for the family's future. You're building wealth, sweetheart. We're so proud of you." My contributions. My money. They'd used my money to seed the trust account, then convinced me it was family money, then planned to give it all to Caroline. They'd stolen from me first. They'd been stealing from me for years. But would it matter? I wasn't a lawyer. I didn't know if this evidence would be enough to protect me, and I couldn't afford to hire someone who did know. I was trapped. Completely, utterly trapped. That's when my laptop pinged with a new email. The subject line read, "I know what your parents did." The sender was someone from the legal department at my former workplace, Emily J. I opened the email with shaking hands. "Your father called to report you. I processed his documents. Something didn't look right. I did some digging. Can we meet?" It was the first glimmer of hope I'd had in days. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't completely alone in this. I agreed to meet Emily at a coffee shop the next morning, before my scheduled appointment with Officer Martinez. I arrived early, ordered a coffee I couldn't taste, and sat in a corner booth watching the door. Emily walked in at exactly 8 o'clock. She was younger than I expected, maybe 26 or 27, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She was wearing business clothes, a folder tucked under her arm. She spotted me and walked over. "Annabelle?" I nodded. She sat down across from me, set the folder on the table. "I shouldn't be doing this. If anyone at the firm finds out I'm sharing confidential documents, I could lose my job." "Then why are you?" I asked. Emily's expression softened. "Because I have a sister too. And if someone was doing to her what your family is doing to you, I'd want someone to help her." She opened the folder and pulled out copies of documents. "Your father submitted these when he filed his report. I'm in the legal department, so I handle all law enforcement requests." When I saw the dollar amount and the nature of the claim, I looked closer. She spread the papers across the table. "See here? He claims the account was entirely funded by him and your mother, but the initial funding sources aren't listed clearly. That's unusual. Most trust accounts have very clear documentation of where the money came from for tax purposes." I leaned forward, studying the documents. "He told me I was just the account manager." "You were, but that doesn't tell the whole story." Emily pulled out another page. "I did some background checking, found records of your grandmother's estate distribution. $25,000 paid to you 8 years ago. Then I found bank transfer records showing that exact amount deposited into your parents' account 3 days later." My heart started beating faster. That was my inheritance. I gave it to them during their financial trouble. Exactly. And that money, plus the monthly contributions you made, these form the foundation of this trust account. Your father's documentation conveniently leaves that part out. "Can you testify to this?" I asked. "At the police station? Or in court, if it goes that far?" Emily hesitated. "I can, but there's something else you should know. The firm that your father works for now, they're a client of ours. He's connected. If I testify against him, it could create problems for our firm's relationship with his company. My boss wouldn't be happy." My hopes started to deflate. "So you can't actually help me." "I didn't say that." Emily leaned back. "I said it would be complicated, but I know people who can help. I have a friend who's a lawyer who specializes in financial abuse cases. I can connect you to. And I can provide these documents anonymously if needed." She wrote down a name and phone number on a napkin and slid it across to me. "Call this person. Explain everything. They'll know what to do." For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "Just promise me you'll fight back," Emily said. "Don't let them destroy you." She stood, gathered her folder, and walked out of the coffee shop. I sat there holding the napkin, feeling like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. I still had my meeting with the police in an hour, but now I had documentation. I had someone willing to help. I had hope. I called the lawyer Emily had recommended, left a detailed voicemail. Then I drove to the police station. Officer Martinez was professional but stern. He took my statement. I explained about the inheritance and the monthly contributions, showed him the emails I'd found. He looked at everything carefully. "This is complicated," he finally said. "You're claiming the money was partially yours, which changes things. But your father's claim is that you were an employee managing the account, and you stole from it. That's a clear-cut embezzlement case unless you can prove ownership." "I have proof. My grandmother's inheritance. Years of my own contributions." "Then you need a lawyer to make that argument. This isn't going away, Miss Price. But it's also not as simple as your father made it seem. I'm going to hold off on filing formal charges until both sides submit more documentation." It wasn't great, but it wasn't the worst outcome either. I left the police station feeling exhausted, but slightly less terrified. The lawyer Emily recommended called me back that afternoon. We talked for an hour. She agreed to take my case and said her fees could be deferred until the case was resolved. Another small miracle. For 2 days, I felt like I was finally getting somewhere. I was building a defense. I had professional help. Things were looking up. Then everything fell apart again. The lawyer called me on Wednesday afternoon. "Annabelle, we have a problem. I reached out to Emily to get copies of those documents she mentioned, and she's refusing to talk to me. She says she can't get involved." "What?" "But she's the one who gave me your name." "I know. But when I called her, she said she made a mistake and can't provide any documents or testimony. She wouldn't explain why." My stomach sank. "Can we subpoena her?" "We could try, but if she's unwilling to cooperate, it's going to be difficult." "Do you have any idea why she'd change her mind?" I didn't, but I was going to find out. I spent hours trying to reach Emily. Called her work number, her cell, sent emails, nothing. Finally, late Thursday night, I got a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. Please don't contact me again." I stared at the text, feeling everything crumbling around me again. Emily had been my only real witness, my only outside confirmation that something was wrong with my father's documentation. I pulled up Emily's social media, something I should have done earlier, scrolled through her Facebook profile, and there, in a photo from 3 years ago, I found my answer. Emily and Caroline at art school together, smiling, arms around each other, tagged as friends. I clicked through more photos, found evidence of a friendship that had apparently ended badly, bitter comments on old posts, signs of a falling out 2 years ago. Then I found a recent photo from last week. Emily having coffee with someone. The caption read, "Good to reconnect with old friends' families." I zoomed in on the photo. The other person in the picture was my mother. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Emily hadn't been helping me. She'd been gathering information. She'd found out exactly what evidence I had, what arguments I planned to make, and she'd reported everything back to my parents. They'd had days to prepare, days to destroy documents, create alternative stories, build their defense. I was so stupid, so desperately naive. I'd trusted someone because I was drowning, and she'd thrown me what looked like a rope, but it was just another chain. I tried to access my old email accounts where I'd stored copies of documents. Passwords changed. I tried to log into cloud storage where I'd backed up files. Access denied. Someone had hacked my accounts. The paper documents I'd kept in my old bedroom at my parents' house, the ones I'd been meaning to get for months. I texted my mother asking if I could come get them. She responded with a photo. My documents burning in their fireplace. The caption read, "You should have returned what wasn't yours." They'd destroyed everything. Every piece of evidence I'd carefully gathered. They'd been one step ahead of me the entire time because Emily had told them exactly what I had. I sat in my nearly empty apartment, most of my belongings already sold to pay bills I couldn't cover without a job. The eviction date was creeping closer. I had 2 weeks left before I'd be homeless. The money sat in my account, untouchable. Using it would confirm the theft charges. Not using it meant losing everything else. I started looking up bus tickets to other states. Maybe I could just disappear, start over somewhere else with a new name. It seemed impossible, but so did everything else. I was packing what little I had left when someone knocked on my door. Heavy, insistent knocking. I considered not answering. It could be the police, could be my parents coming to gloat, could be the landlord checking to make sure I was preparing to leave. The knocking continued. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole. Brandon. My sister's ex-fiancé, the man whose affair had destroyed the engagement party. What could he possibly want? I opened the door. He stood there in casual clothes, jeans, and a button-down shirt, looking uncomfortable but determined. He was holding a folder, a thick folder. "I need to talk to you," he said. "About your family. I have information. Information they don't know I have, and I think you're going to want to see it." I let Brandon into my apartment. He looked around at the boxes, the stripped-down space, and his expression turned sympathetic. "They're destroying you," he said. It wasn't a question. "Trying to," I replied. "What do you want?" Brandon sat down on my couch, set the folder on the coffee table. "When I was engaged to Caroline, your parents wanted me to merge finances with her before the wedding. They kept pushing me to set up joint accounts, give Caroline access to my trust fund. They said it was about commitment, about showing I was serious about the marriage." I sat down across from him. "But you didn't." "No. Something felt off about how insistent they were. And I'm not stupid. I come from money. I've seen people try to get at my family's wealth before. So I refused. Your parents got really cold after that, really hostile." He opened the folder. "One night I was at their house, and I needed to use the bathroom. Went upstairs, got turned around looking for it. I accidentally ended up in your father's office. The door was open, and I saw documents spread across his desk. Bank statements, email printouts." Brandon pulled out his phone, started swiping through photos. "I shouldn't have, but I took pictures. I told myself it was just insurance in case they came after me, and I'm glad I did." He turned his phone toward me. The photos showed bank statements from 8 years ago, deposits labeled with my name, Annabelle contribution, Annabelle inheritance funds, transfer records showing money moving from various accounts into the trust account. "These prove the account was funded with your money," Brandon said. "The initial $25,000 from your inheritance is right there, then monthly deposits for years, all labeled with your name." I stared at the photos, hardly daring to believe it. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I saw what they did to you at that party. I saw how they blamed you for everything, even my affair. And then, after Caroline and I broke up, your mother called me." Brandon's jaw tightened. "She offered to pay me to not tell anyone about what happened. Hush money. She said if I stayed quiet about Helen, she'd give me $50,000. Did you take it?" "Hell no. I told her exactly what I thought of her and her whole family. Well, not you. I said you seemed like the only decent person in that whole mess." He leaned forward. "After that call, I started thinking about what I'd seen in that office, about the way they talked about you, how they'd used you for years. And I realized they'd been trying to do the same thing to me." Brandon handed me his phone. "I'm giving you copies of all these photos. You can use them however you need to. And if you need me to testify about where I got them and when, I will. I don't care if it makes things awkward. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." "Because someone needs to stand up to bullies. Your parents are bullies. They've been manipulating and using you for years, and now they're trying to destroy you for finally pushing back. That's not right." I took his phone, scrolled through the images. There were dozens of them. Bank statements, email printouts showing my father discussing managing Annabelle's contributions, notes about investment strategies for A's money. This was everything I needed. Everything Emily had tried to get and then betrayed me over. But this time, my parents didn't know this evidence existed. "Thank you," I said, and my voice broke. "You have no idea what this means." Brandon stood up. "Get them, Annabelle. Get your money back and make them pay for what they did." He left, and I immediately called my lawyer. Sent her all the photos. She called me back within an hour. "This is incredible. This changes everything. With this documentation, we can prove the account was substantially funded by your inheritance and contributions. We can fight the embezzlement charges and file a countersuit for fraud and financial abuse." We worked for 3 days straight, building the case. My lawyer filed motions to have the charges against me dropped. Prepared documentation showing my parents had misrepresented the source of the trust funds. Built an argument that they'd committed fraud by claiming ownership of my money. On Monday morning, we had a meeting with my parents and their lawyer at my lawyer's office. It was the first time I'd seen them since the disastrous engagement party. They looked confident, almost smug. My father's lawyer started by demanding I return the money immediately and agree not to press charges for the emotional distress I'd caused the family. My lawyer smiled. Then she presented Brandon's evidence. All of it. Laid it out piece by piece on the conference table. I watched my parents' faces change. Confidence to confusion to understanding to fear. These documents prove the trust account was primarily funded by Miss Price's inheritance and personal contributions over 6 years, my lawyer said. They also prove her parents misrepresented the source of these funds and attempted to permanently deprive her of her own money by transferring it to her sister. This isn't embezzlement. This is a daughter taking back what was stolen from her. My father's lawyer shuffled through the papers, his expression growing more uncomfortable by the second. He leaned over to whisper to my parents. "Where did you get these?" my father demanded, looking at me. "Does it matter?" I replied. My voice was steadier than I expected. My mother started crying. Not sad tears. Angry, frustrated tears. "How can you do this to us? We're your parents. We raised you. We gave you everything." "You took everything," I corrected. "You took my inheritance. You took 6 years of contributions. You manipulated me into growing my own money so you could give it to Caroline. And when I finally stood up for myself, you tried to have me arrested. This family is broken because of you," my father said. His voice shook with rage. "Everything that's happened, Caroline's engagement falling apart, all of it is your fault." "No," I said. "This family was broken long before I took that money. You just never noticed because the dysfunction worked in your favor." My lawyer continued. "My client is willing to settle. You return her inheritance and contributions plus interest. You also pay for the emotional distress and financial damages caused by your false police report. Total amount, $273,000. "We don't have that kind of money," my father said. "Then we go to trial, and everything becomes public record. Your fraud, your financial abuse, all of it. Your choice." My parents and their lawyer huddled together, whispering. Finally, their lawyer said, "We need time to consider." "You have 48 hours, my lawyer replied. We left the meeting. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. We were going to win. We had to. But then 2 days later, I got a notification. My parents had filed for bankruptcy. I called my lawyer immediately. "What does this mean?" Her voice was grim. "It means they're trying to make themselves judgment-proof. If they have no assets, you can't collect even if you win the case. But they have the house. They have savings. Check the property records." I did. The house had been transferred to Caroline's name last week. A quitclaim deed signed over days after our confrontation at the lawyer's office. My parents had moved all their assets out of their own names, put everything in Caroline's name, then declared bankruptcy. Even if I won legally, I'd never see a penny. My mother sent me a text that evening. "You'll never get your money. Hope destroying your family was worth it. Have a nice life." I sat there, staring at the message, feeling everything crash down around me again. They'd won. Even with all the evidence, all the legal maneuvering, they'd found a way to win. But then I remembered something. Something in Brandon's photos I'd noticed, but hadn't fully processed. I pulled them up again, zoomed in on one particular image. It was an email from 8 years ago. A conversation between my father and someone else about closing the business. But the tone was wrong. It wasn't desperate or sad. It was calculating. I read it more carefully. "We'll close under Chapter 11, move the assets to the new LLC, reopen under different registration. Annabelle will never need to know the business is still running. She'll support the family, and Caroline will be free to pursue her dreams." My hands started shaking. I scrolled through more photos, found more emails, plans to strategically declare bankruptcy while hiding assets, discussions about leveraging Annabelle's sense of responsibility. They'd faked the bankruptcy 8 years ago. The business hadn't actually failed. They'd closed it strategically, hidden the assets, then reopened under a different name. The financial crisis that had made me give up graduate school and spend 6 years supporting them had been manufactured. And my father's heart attack? That had been real. But everything else? The desperation, the crisis, the need for my help? Planned, manipulated. A lie designed to trap me into becoming their financial support system. I found the LLC registration records online. The new business had started 3 months after the supposed bankruptcy. Same services, same clients, different name. My father was still running it. Had been this entire time. Successfully, profitably. They'd been making money for years while I lived in poverty, sending them cash every month. And now they'd just tried the same trick again. Fake bankruptcy number 2. But this time, I had proof of the first fraud. And bankruptcy fraud has a statute of limitations of 5 years for civil cases, but longer for criminal cases. They'd committed the same crime twice, and I could prove it. I called my lawyer, explained everything, sent her the evidence. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "This is bigger than financial abuse. This is bankruptcy fraud, federal crime. If you report this, your father could go to prison." "Good," I said, and I meant it. We drafted a new ultimatum. I sent it to my father's email with copies of all the evidence attached. Return my money plus $100,000 in damages, or I send this evidence to federal investigators. You taught me to be good with money, Dad. That includes knowing when the numbers don't add up. You have 24 hours. The phone rang at 6 o'clock the next morning. My father. I answered. "Hello. How did you find this?" His voice was hollow, defeated. Not angry anymore, just broken. "Does it matter?" There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. Then, the bankruptcy filing. If that's investigated, if they look into the previous one too, I could face federal charges. "Yes," I said simply. Another pause. "You'd really do that? Send your own father to prison?" I thought about that question. Thought about the 22-year-old girl who'd given up her dreams to save her family. Thought about 6 years of ramen dinners and secondhand furniture and 2 jobs and no vacations. Thought about the trust fund that had been built with my inheritance and my contributions. Thought about my mother's Instagram comment. "She's the only one who makes us proud." "You were willing to send me to prison for taking back my own money," I said. "So yes, I would." I heard something that might have been a sob, or maybe just a sharp breath. "What do you want?" $273,000. Wired to my account by the end of the day. A signed confession admitting the trust account was funded by my money, and that you misrepresented ownership, and an agreement that you'll withdraw the current bankruptcy filing, and never contact me again unless I reach out first. That's everything. That's our entire savings. The house down payment, all of it. Good. You took everything from me. Seems fair. Annabelle. 24 hours, I said. Or the evidence goes to the FBI. I hung up. The money appeared in my account at 4 o'clock that afternoon. All of it. $273,000. The signed documents came via my lawyer an hour later. Everything I'd asked for, agreed to, and notarized. I'd won. My lawyer called me that evening. "It's over. They've agreed to all terms. The criminal complaint against you has been officially withdrawn. You're free and clear. Free and clear." The words didn't feel real yet, but there was one more call I needed to take. Caroline. She called me that night. Her voice was small, nothing like the confident, angry sister from the engagement party. "Annabelle? It's me. I know. Can we talk?" I almost said no, almost hung up, but something made me say, "Okay." "I didn't know," Caroline began. Her voice was shaking. "About the inheritance, about your contributions. Mom told me the trust account was their money, that they were being generous by giving it to me for my wedding. She said you were just managing it because you were good with finances." I didn't say anything. When everything came out, when the lawyers started showing documents, I saw what they did, what they'd been doing for years. They used you, Annabelle. They used both of us, really, just in different ways. "How did they use you?" I asked. I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. "They made me think I was special because I was an artist. that I deserved support because I was creating something beautiful. They convinced me that your sacrifices were just what responsible people do, and that my dreams were more important because I was more fragile. She paused. I believed them. I never questioned why you were working 2 jobs while I got to travel and paint. I thought that was just how our family worked. It was how our family worked, I said. One daughter sacrificed everything. The other got everything handed to her. And our parents made sure we both thought that was normal. I'm sorry, Caroline whispered. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know I was horrible to you. But I'm sorry. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to forgive her. Part of me wanted to tell her it was okay. But it wasn't okay. Not yet. I need time, I said. I need to figure out who I am without this family. Without being the responsible one or the stable one or the one who fixes everything. I understand. I'm moving out of Mom and Dad's house, starting therapy. I think I need to figure out who I am too, without them telling me I'm special and fragile and need protection. Good, I said, and I meant it. Can I call you in a few months? Maybe we could get coffee or something? Maybe, I said. I'll think about it. Okay, that's fair. She paused. I hope you find what makes you happy, Annabelle. Really happy. You deserve that. We hung up. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by boxes I'd packed to leave, with $273,000 in my bank account and no criminal charges hanging over my head. I unpacked the boxes, called my landlord and told him I'd be staying. Got my job back at the accounting firm after showing them the documentation proving I'd been falsely accused. Started putting my life back together. But more than that, I started building the life I'd always wanted. 3 months later, I was standing in front of the Trevi Fountain in Rome. The water sparkled in the afternoon Sunday. Tourists crowded around me, laughing and taking photos. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I'd used some of the settlement money to take the trip Caroline had been supposed to go on. 3 months in Italy, living in a small apartment in Rome, learning to paint. Something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. I wasn't good at painting yet. Probably never would be, honestly. But I didn't care. I was doing it because I wanted to, not because someone told me I should or shouldn't. Not because it was practical or responsible. Just because it made me happy. I'd also enrolled in an online graduate program, data science, the degree I'd turned down 6 years ago, starting over at 28. Better late than never. And I'd started therapy, real therapy, not just talking to friends, but working with a professional to understand how I'd let myself be used for so long, how I'd convinced myself that sacrifice without reciprocity was love. How I'd needed my family's approval so badly that I'd given them everything and accepted nothing in return. I was learning that being responsible doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. That family should build you up, not drain you dry. That sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away, even when it hurts. My laptop sat in my bag. I'd gotten an email notification earlier. New message from Caroline. I hadn't opened it yet. I pulled it up now. The subject line read, "Thank you." I clicked it open. "Thank you for standing up to them. You breaking free helped me see I was trapped too, even if my cage looked prettier than yours. I moved out. I'm in therapy. I'm working a real job now, paying my own bills, learning what I'm actually capable of when I'm not being coddled. It's hard, but it feels real. Maybe one day we can both heal. Maybe one day we can be sisters again. But until then, I hope you're happy. I hope you're doing everything you ever wanted to do. You deserve it." I closed the laptop without responding. Maybe I'd reply later. Maybe I wouldn't. For now, I was giving myself permission to focus on me. I pulled out a sketchbook, found a spot on a bench near the fountain, and started drawing. The lines were shaky. The proportions were wrong. I was a beginner, and it showed. But I was drawing. In Rome, in the middle of the day. Because I wanted to. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of myself. Not because I'd accomplished something impressive, or because I'd sacrificed for others, or because I'd lived up to someone's expectations. Just because I'd finally chosen myself. I'd spent 28 years believing that being the responsible one meant sacrificing everything, that loving my family meant accepting whatever they decided I deserved, that my worth was measured by how useful I was to other people. But responsibility without reciprocity isn't love, it's exploitation. And family that only values you for what you provide isn't family, it's a transaction. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. That walking away from people who hurt you isn't weakness, even if they're family. That sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let others face the consequences of their own choices. And I learned that making yourself proud is more important than making anyone else proud. The Roman sunset painted the sky orange and pink. The fountain water sparkled like diamonds. My sketchbook page was filling up with imperfect lines and shapes that somehow, together, were starting to look like something beautiful. I'd lost my family, but I'd found myself, and that was the greatest victory of all. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were giving everything to people who gave nothing back? Have you ever had to choose between your own dreams and someone else's expectations? What would you do if you were in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own strength, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe they're going through something similar. Maybe they need to know they're not alone. Maybe they need permission to choose themselves. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there find the courage to set boundaries, stand up for themselves, and remember that their own happiness matters just as much as anyone else's. Take care of yourselves. You're worth it.